This is the TI-34 calculator, and we're going to go ahead and find the mean, standard deviation, and variance for a set of data. My calculator is currently off, so the first thing I need to do is turn it on. When I turn it on, it's kind of hard to see up here because it's an old calculator that's scratchy, but I'm not necessarily in statistics mode, but that's okay. So the first thing I want to do is enter a set of data. And you'll notice on the third row, second from the right, is the word data. And when I do that, I've got a list where I can enter my data, except for there's already a set of numbers there. I could go ahead and keep deleting those numbers, but that might take me a while. So a quicker option would be to go ahead, hit the data button again, and now that I have the ability to clear any or all of the lists, since our data was only in list 1 and I want to put stuff in list 1, I will go ahead and leave that highlighted, hit enter, and I jump back to list 1, which is ready for my data value. And if you couldn't read it, I know this is a bad version of this, but notice down here it also says L1. So to enter data, I go ahead and enter the first number. Let's use 7. And notice you don't see the 7 up in the list, but you see it down here with the blinking cursor afterwards. That means that after I type the number, I also need to hit enter so that that number gets stored into the list. And I finish my list out that way. I'm going to hit 10. We just learned I have to hit enter, and I should see 10 up in my list. The L1 has a 3 in parentheses, meaning it's waiting for the third number. So let's go ahead and use 15 and 18 as our next two numbers. You can see the 15 and the 18. The 17 scrolled off to the top, we can't see it, but because L1 has a 5, it means it's waiting for a 5th number, and since I don't have 5 numbers, I know everything I needed is stored. So now I'm ready to do some statistical calculations. You'll notice above the data button it says stat in white, and over here my second button is in white. So I'm going to push second and data to get the white version. And my choices are 1 or 2 variable statistics. We're just using 1 variable statistics. So while I left that highlighted, I can hit enter. And it says, well, which list was your data stored in? Ours was stored in 1, otherwise we could arrow over and hit enter to select one of those. The frequency, all of those numbers, I'm going to assume they only show up once. I don't want a series of values for them. So I'm going to scroll down, and I'm ready to calculate. So I hit enter. So this starts off letting me know, n equals 4. There were 4 numbers in my list. Always a good idea to double check that you don't have more or less than you needed. Item number 2 gives me x bar equals 12.5. That means the sample mean is 12.5, and since mu, the population mean, is also the same calculation formula, it's also 12.5. So the average of those numbers is 12.5. 3 gives me S sub x, subscript of x, the sample standard deviation. So in this case, 4.9328, etc., is the sample standard deviation. Now, had those 4 numbers been a sample, this is the standard deviation I would have wanted, but if I needed the variance, you'll notice as you scroll around, there's no variance number. So when I come back to the 3, make sure that that S sub x is highlighted. If I hit enter, it wants to put that as the 5th item in my list, but that's okay because I'm just going to use this as kind of like scratch area. The variance is the standard deviation squared. I want this number squared. So instead of having to type it and multiply it by itself twice, I could put it in the list, square it, and you can see I'm about to square it, but I don't see it squared anywhere. So I do need to hit enter. And up there, and I can even scroll up to get more of the decimal values, is 24.3333, etc. The sample variance is 24.33, etc. Now, had those 4 numbers been a population and not a sample, then you wouldn't want sample information for standard deviation and variance, you'd want population. So for me to do that now, I don't want that 24 number in my list. So I can go ahead and just delete it, and I'm back to my original 4 numbers, and they're already stored. So again, I can hit second and stat, and note that I'm going to be using that data as is, but this time I'm going to scroll down to choice 4, sigma sub x, the Greek lowercase letter for s with a subscript of x meaning population standard deviation. I get the 4.272 number, which is smaller than the one above because population standard deviations are always smaller than sample standard deviations. And I can write that number down. Had I needed the population variance, I'm going to go through the same process where I'm going to select that by hitting enter. It's going to go into my list. I'm going to choose to square it. And I need to hit enter one final time. And I can even scroll up to notice this time there are no other decimal values. 18.25 is the population variance. And that is how you use the TI-34 calculator.